Welcome to our new episode of HR Visionaries. Today we're going to talk to Paul, who is an expert in how to approach Generation Z. Stay tuned. Welcome to HR Visionaries, where we unlock the secrets of modern HR. I'm Benjamin, your host. Join us as we shed light on today's HR universe with HR leaders and innovators from across the globe. Whether you're an HR pro, a business leader, or just curious about the future of work, this is your shortcut to the forefront of HR innovation. Brought to you by Hire, the AI talent attraction platform. Welcome to our latest episode of HR Visionaries. I'm looking forward to my guest today, Paul. Paul, thanks for taking the time.
Thanks, I'm very glad to be here.
Paul, can you quickly introduce yourself in 5 or 6 sentences?
Yes.
So who are you?
My name is Paul von Preussen. I worked for Commerzbank as an assistant of a member of the management board until summer 22, and I founded DIGITAL8, which is a network of about 300 young people between 16 and 30 years old, who we are matching together with the biggest corporates, DAX corporates in Germany, to help the management board members understand the young generation and the future trends.
Okay, I'm super excited because, well, obviously understanding this famous Generation Z is obviously super interesting. I, however, need to ask you one question. So most of the people listening in will probably wonder, okay, Paul von Preussen, you're related to the previous imperial family of Germany.
Yeah, so my great-great-great-grandfather was the last German Kaiser. But I would say I'm firstly defining myself for the work that I'm doing with DIGITAL8, and then secondly, obviously everybody's talking about the family, but what I like most to discuss is not the historic topics, but the future topics and the things that I can actually change, right? Because I can't change the past, I can't change what happened within the last 300 to 500 years. But I hope to change something at least for the next, 50 years or something.
You mentioned you worked for Commerzbank, which is super interesting given we just found out that, well, a few years ago we probably worked like at the same street, just on opposite sides of the street. That's really amazing. Can you tell us a bit about your job at Commerzbank? What did you do there?
So I did my A-levels in Germany, finished school when I was 17, and I didn't know what to do afterwards. And as many of my family members and friends studied law, I thought, well, okay, let's study law. And then between my A-levels and starting at Humboldt University, my father said, well, boy, you can do something in between, right? And so I did an internship at a bank. And then Commerzbank asked me, do you want to work for us in a dual study or duales Studium in Germany, in Berlin? And I thought, well, I'm 17. Well, I can make some money, understand something about the financial sector. And so I thought, well, okay, let's do it. And when I'm 20, after 3 years of studying, I still can study law. That didn't happen. I worked for Commerzbank 9 years, all in all. Started in Berlin and then went to Frankfurt to the headquarters. Worked in digital strategy and also in investment banking or capital markets, to specify it a bit. Non-banking financial institutions, and my last position then was, as I mentioned, the assistant of the member of the management board. She was the HR executive for Commerzbank, and that was an interesting time because until 22, Commerzbank cut many jobs, and to see that in such a big corporate, that was very interesting. And but after that time, I decided to focus on my own company, DIGITAL8, and I'm really enjoying that right now.
Awesome. How was it to work for a very senior person within the company that is probably demanding, that has probably very tight schedule, that probably has like lots of stuff happening outside the normal working hours. How did you approach that?
Yeah, so the first point when I was asked, I talked to my wife, right? Because a decision like that has like a huge impact on your daily life, like every workday and also on the weekends. And she was okay, given the fact that normally when you're doing that job, it's in a fixed time slot between 1.5 years to 2.5 years almost. And afterwards, most of the times, if you're doing a good job, you get the opportunity to do something important, or at least something very interesting at an interesting position within the company. Well, and I mean, the first point was the working hours. I don't know, between 65 to 80 hours a week, I would say. But I wouldn't say that was the hardest part. I think the hardest part actually is that you have very little opportunities to define your own schedule, because every time something happens, you have to jump. And normally it's not the great stuff that lands on the table of the management board member, but all the problems and all the shit stuff, right? And then somehow you have to solve that. And that was very interesting and very tough, but I learned a lot. And I was one of the youngest assistants, so that was very challenging as well. But for me, it was so interesting to see how firstly decisions are made, and also to see how such huge strategic processes are started, and then how that works out, how managers are talking to the people that, I don't know, might lose their job, for example, or how they thought about, despite the fact that they have to cut around about 10,000 jobs brutto, and how they can define still a good culture within the company, which is a very interesting question, right?
Tough, right?
Yeah, and on top of that, it was also interesting to see how, I mean, that was a time where, I mean, still today everybody's talking about digital transformation, right? But that was a time where it had a huge impact on the strategy of the bank, and to develop that strategy, and also see why digital transformation projects also in HR are working out or are not working out. That was very interesting to see. Yeah.
How did that shape your considerations becoming a founder, becoming an entrepreneur?
To be honest, we started DIGITAL8 before I was becoming the management assistant. So I think in 2016 or 17, when I worked at the digital transformation team at Commerzbank, we had this task to change something about the culture, and to put a positive spotlight on digital transformation. And then we saw in the company that many times digital projects, for example, software implementations or something like that, went wrong or failed. And that was, interestingly, not firstly because of budget problems or technology problems, but the main reason was the people, right? So the users on the client side, or internally the employee side. And we thought about, well, what can we do about that? And then we saw one group within the corporate that was very open when it came to new technology. I mean, normally most of the users or potential users said, I didn't use any software like this for the last 20 years. Why should I now start to do so, right? Or maybe I could lose my job within the next 2 years because of that software or something like that. I don't want to crack anything, right? So, but there was one group that didn't have any of those thoughts, and that was most of the time the young generation. we thought, well, how can we take that mindset and leverage it for the whole company? And what we also saw is that in many projects, it really was dependent on the managers. So in Germany, we have this saying, how do you say that? The fish is smelling from the head. I don't know if that's an English term, right? But they're fished in from Kopf, right? So, and if you can change something at the peak of the pyramid, the changes at the bottom of it are much bigger, right? So, and we thought, let's put those two factors together, and we started to match the younger generation with the managers to give them some insights on what's currently happening. And then just 2 sentences, and then I'm finished. And then the press and also other big corporates came to us and asked us, what are you doing there? And then we saw, well, that might be an opportunity. We saw that it's not only a thing for Commerzbank, but actually for many huge corporates in Germany. And that was the point where we decided to found DIGITAL8. And after I was asked, so after the 1.5 or 2 years were done at the management assistant position, I asked myself, what's my next step? Do I want to carry on within a great organization? I like Commerzbank, and I'm really thankful for the time. Or do I want to take the chance and focus a bit more on my own company, right? So, and then I made this decision, and I'm actually very happy that it turned out very well.
Was it tough for you to end your corporate career starting as an entrepreneur yourself?
Well, I mean, if you're a good banker, one of your key messages to the client is always put your wealth on diverse channels, right? And diversity in the manner of
diverse investment,
right? Diverse investments, yes.
Enough Markowitz.
Yes, yes, and I mean, it's the same for every personal life, I would say. So when I said, well, I'm going to end this chapter now, I decided to, of course, focus on DIGITAL8, but also try some other stuff. And so I'm actually now also working with some SMEs in Berlin. I'm some and also some foundations, for example, helping them in a strategic way. And yeah, so I try to do many different stuff, and being able to have this freedom of choice, I would say. When you live that for a few months, it's actually quite easy. The change is very easy. And to be honest, if you're doing a great job in a corporate, the risk of going is not too high, I would say, because most of the times you get the chance to come back, and actually are asked many times. I don't know how that worked out for you, but for me, I saw that, and I think it's okay. Yeah,
It was exactly the same for me. I also loved my job. I loved every second. However, as you said, so you decide, okay, this is the right choice for that moment, and well, you leave with great memories. You leave with a great network. Leave with great relationships. And therefore, it's always a chance to come back, right? So I think it's great to jump.
Yes,
and
with
then
the moment.
Just do it, right?
Yeah, right. Mm-hmm.
Well, your big topic is how the generation that now enters the workforce is different, or perhaps it's even very similar to the previous ones. How did you come up with okay, that is the theme I'd like to talk about?
I'm still not sure if that's the theme I want to talk about, right? But it's just a side effect. I don't know. So yeah. I mean, we founded DIGITAL8 because we thought let's change perspectives, and let's show managers in the corporates and SMEs of Germany the world outside, right? Like what we see is that I saw it at Commerzbank as well, and it's normal, right? You're having you have to deal with many different problems, and you have this ecosystem you're living in, but you don't have the chance, you don't even have the time really to take a look outside of your bubble. But sometimes that actually would be a great deal for you, because you could see, I don't know, your future clients, your future employees, how they are thinking, how they are working, their demands and everything. So that was the idea basically. And now the current generation we're talking about that's entering the workforce happens to be the Gen Z. I can't do anything about it. And most of the times when I'm asked questions about the Gen Z, I always like to say, let's cut the bullshit, right? So there's so many articles in media, so many press releases and everything about stereotypes, and I don't know, the younger generation wants this and that and everything. But when we take a closer look, you mentioned it a bit, many of, for example, the values we as Gen Z have in comparison, for example, to the boomers, baby boomers, are the same. One study that was published last year from Simon Schnetzer, who we are working together with, he's doing many studies about the generations for many years now. Actually showed that the first three values of the baby boomer generation and the Gen Z generation in Germany are the same, which is very interesting, right? So, I mean, obviously there is one difference to other generations, and that's the world of technology we were raised in, right? But I would say that's the hugest difference. Yeah.
What I find so interesting is that, well, perhaps a bit on the meta level, talking about this, values and perspectives are very similar. However, the language they communicate or Gen Z communicates in is perhaps a bit different, which was perhaps, well, due to, well, being raised as digital natives, wasn't the case previously. Perhaps maybe that's the biggest difference, because I find it always so interesting when looking at statistics and everyone is like, hey, so like you expect things to change dramatically. No, it's all the same. So it's from generation to generation. It's very similar in terms of values, in terms of why going to work. Perhaps it was kind of an outlier 15 years ago when, well, yeah, that generation internship where, well, you basically worked for very little money, very long working hours, and now it's a bit different, that people are like, hey, to be honest, if I work hard, I want to be paid in an appropriate way. Well, which kind of reflects the realities in the labor market, but in general, it's actually very similar. However, there's become kind of a media thing to talk about how different things are.
Yeah. So I mean, there's one point. I mean, as we said, the technology perspective, being raised as a digital native, right? I mean, that's a point. And our generation is used to social media, for example. So we are used to being listened to. We as every young generation, we are using the latest trends, right? And we are living with them. So we are used to those to social media, and that might be. There is something that, that's a difference, right? But I would say that the biggest, or actually, the biggest impact is not maybe that our generation is so different or something, but that we are, in comparison to the baby boomers, we're just a few people, right? So at the end, I would say this war for talent, that is actually the thing that makes companies now look at the younger generation, focusing on it, because they know that they want to win them, and that makes my generation look on the job market and say, well, okay, let's try, right? let's see what you can give me, right? And I know that I could get that job or this job. Okay, how far can I go? I mean, everyone would do that, right? So I can understand that in a way, but that's the difference in comparison to, I don't know, the workforce 20, 30, 50 years ago. And there has always been a young generation, and this generation was always said about that it was crazy and lazy and whatever. But now the job market has changed within the last years, and that is what I would say is the biggest change, and which also makes the media look at the young generation and think about what do they like, what do they want. And it's for a company, it's very important to look at that, to look at this. But I wouldn't say that, to come back to your question, that there's like this whole fuss about young generations. I mean, we have many different talents in our pool, right? More than 300. And what I see is, I mean, diversity in a good way, right? So so many different personalities, so many different histories, so many different stories. That might be something that you could also sum up the Gen Z with. But I am not a fan of saying they want more work-life balance, they want more home office or whatever. To be honest, every other generation is talking about this the same.
Well, the point you mentioned regarding social media is, I think, super interesting, given, well, what's the difference between, well, like 20 years ago when you could read an article online, now you can basically talk to a politician on Twitter and he or she replies, and then, well, as you said, you're heard rather than just being a passive consumer, being more active. Well, that translates then at the workplace, probably in the situations where you then, well, not just receive orders or just accept the task. However, you kind of question the task, and you then, well, want to talk basically on the same level, which is for some companies perhaps a challenge.
Yes. So what's interesting is that the generation that's entering the workforce now also has something to say, and where other generations that worked for a company, for example, 5 or 10, 15, 20 years, can actually learn from them, even though they just entered the workforce, which is when we're talking about, for example, social media, digital communication, and maybe also some, I don't know, what technologies do you use and stuff like that. That is something that is also quite new, I would say. And that's something that we are focusing on. We are saying, guys, you can also learn something from the young generation, right? And let's not talk about each other, but let's talk with each other. And we are trying to organize those formats, for example, with reverse mentoring programs where we are matching executives with young people, depending on the topics that the executives have questions about, and also the personality and the story of them. And that's really, really interesting, because after half a year or a year being together in a reverse mentoring tandem in this program, you really see that things change also for the executives. Obviously also for the young people, right? But for example, I saw a CEO of a company who said IT is the biggest budget every year I'm spending. I'm spending on IT, and to be honest, it's a black box for me. I don't know what's happening there. I thought that was really honest. And he then said he wanted to take part in a reverse mentoring program, and usually we are using external mentors, right? Because we say that, I mean, internal young people from within the company, they can also be great, but when it comes to real knowledge of a topic that a company is not focused on, I mean, then obviously people from outside are more likely to be into their topics, right? So, and also the hierarchy borders are also a very important factor. Well, so we matched the CEO with a young IT talent, and after half a year, the CEO said, "Okay, I now learned how our IT infrastructure could look like and how it actually looks," and then he fired his IT boss, which I thought was crazy because, there are many factors, right, driving this decision. But obviously, the point where it started was this reverse mentoring program, and I thought, well, that is actually a huge impact that we're having when we're talking about reverse mentorings with a young generation, and that is something that I when I'm talking about this, don't talk about each other, but talk with each other, where I see a huge power in it.
Well, and coming back to technology and also the story that you just mentioned, the power this generation has is, I think, also in some ways unprecedented. Given, you grew up with lots of great technology that's changing all the time, while this generation is used to working with that technology. Others that maybe, let's say, 50 years old are not that used to this, and therefore this competitive advantage that used to be there probably shrinks a lot, right? So it shrinks to an extent that your mentee tells you how your technology stack should look like, and you realize, okay, the dude that has done this job for years is apparently not up to the task. So that's incredibly powerful.
Yes, and I mean, I see it in my own person, right? I'm 28 years old now, and honestly, when the new social media app is released, I'm really thinking about if I should download it. Most of the times, I'm downloading it just for the sake of it, just to see what's happening there. And most of the times, I'm deleting it right away afterwards again. Right, but so I'm seeing that I'm getting old as well. The point I want to make is that's normal, right? This that's the normal process of at some point focusing on topics that you want to work on, and then it's normal that you're not following every trend that you followed when you were 15 years old or something. I think that it's the art of, at the right time and at the right place, still take a look at the things, even if you don't have to use them, but you should try them out. That's the point I want to make. And the art of finding a right way to deal with it. And what I would say is that first point, you have to take some time for that, and secondly, who's the one who's telling you where to look at, right? And for that, I think it's really great to have a person that is allowed to speak into your life on a trust basis, right? I like the expression psychological safety, right? And that happens when two people come together and you can really ask honest questions, and you know that your mentor won't talk about it because he or she is not even part of your company, right? So there's no one gonna talk about it in the company, and I think there lies a beauty in it, because when you have those when you start those relationships on a trust basis, you can actually also start to talk into the daily life of a person, and that is really powerful. That's much more powerful than take a look at a webinar or read a case study with. Don't read a case study with 60 slides or 60 pages. Just talk 60 minutes to the person that that knows what he or she is talking about, right?
This openness, I think, for many companies is kind of a challenge to deal with that, right? So to see that for older people or more mature people with this competitive advantage that used to be 30 years ago used to be super big, shrinks. So the openness of people to voice their concerns, which I think in particular in a world where brain power is everything, and we have to develop creative solutions, it's actually a great advantage, right? But how can companies prepare for being open to this and see this as an opportunity rather than a threat? So given, staying with the example of the older person that's more mature, he or she could focus on completely different things and let young people do stuff that they are very good at.
So I was at this panel discussion last year in one of the DAX corporates with a guy who had to I don't know how he wants to do it, but he has to hire 20,000 employees within 2 years.
Okay. Wow.
And so we were on this panel talk and we were discussing young talents and everything like that. And then in the Q&A, it was an internal discussion. So the employees of this company were allowed to ask questions. And most of the questions were, it's interesting that you're talking about the young generation, but what about us? What about us as employees that worked for this corporate for the last 15 or 20 years and that saved your ass during Corona, for example? What about us?
Indeed, because it's like often the kind of threat that those people that are a bit more vocal are heard, while those others who are not used to being vocal are overheard. Right?
Yes, right. And that was... I really loved that because that really shows what we are talking about. We are talking on the one side, obviously, about the challenge that companies have to think about how to be attractive for the future employees, right? But also how to maintain the knowledge and the values of the current workforce that might leave the job market within the next 3 to 5 years. And it's a huge risk of losing so many information, so much knowledge. And that again shows how important it is to foster this dialogue between the generations. For the younger employees or the younger generation to be open to give their opinions and also, I don't know, ask questions. And for the more experienced generation to be open to firstly maybe give feedback, but also share knowledge and get into this discussion. I would say that's actually for the next years it's crucial because it's not artificial intelligence that will take everything over and in 5 years you're rid of this problem with the aging demographics in Germany.
Well, I think it's in particular challenging for many companies to go through a transformation anyhow, right? So when you're looking at for example, the energy sector, energy companies 15 years ago looked utterly different from how they look now. Therefore, also making sure that, those people who are more mature, that their value is valued, right? And their contribution is valued, rather than, okay, let's get some new people in, let's change everything, and, thanks a lot for your service, but here we are, right? So I think it's a tremendous challenge for companies to maintain talents that are more mature, however, at the same time being open to young people from Generation Z who are willing to contribute now.
Yeah, and I mean that's the task for the management, right? That's why you are a manager, to deal with this challenge, and that is why we are focusing on those people with these positions in the company, because they can have an impact on this discussion, on culture. They can have an impact on the strategic development within a company. And it really makes sense as a person in this position to, at some time or the other, take a look at the outside and just reflect on those questions and maybe talk to someone who might be in your target group about the challenges you're having. Yeah.
What do you think are the most important skills besides like this openness and the open-mindedness in general for leaders who want to or who understand that this generation is not that different, however the communication is different and the way how problems are addressed is different.
So I mean, it's a sentence that we are hearing every day, that leadership is people's business. But at the end, it's, I would say, managing this this conflict of, on the one side, maintaining knowledge, and on the other side, attracting the young and hot stuff that you want to have in your company. But how is that? I mean, how can you do so? Most of the time, as a manager, and I saw that at Commerzbank, you are in this bubble, and to take a look at what's happening outside. I would say this outside is, on the one side, technology, obviously, but also maybe the best example for that, Gucci in 2014, I think, had about the same about the same numbers as Prada had in 2000. I think it was 2014, and then they decided to change the management. And the management of Gucci in 2015 then decided to do something that was never done before in the fashion world. They started a shadow board with the management round, and in some management discussions, they asked people of the younger generation to join to challenge the decisions of the management board. And 3 years later, in 2018, the numbers of Prada, the direct opponent, decreased, I think, for about 11% or something. And the numbers of Gucci increased, I think, for about 136% within 3 years. And I mean, you can now say, well, that also, as any time, there are many factors that have I don't know that let managers decide this or that. But what I want to tell with this story is the dialogue between the generation is not like a happy clappy stuff. We're all dancing around the fire or something, right? Hugging trees or something. But it is something that really can have an impact on your numbers. And seeing that as a manager is, I think, the biggest challenge. But if you know how to do, you have it's a real advantage in regard to the competitors. Yeah.
It's an amazing story. I still love that one scene from this movie. I think it's called The Big Short, when the CEO is like, hey, I have one job, and it's to know when the music stops playing and when it's about dancing. And that's exactly it, right? So if you miss that trend, if you miss what new buyers appreciate, you miss the entire point of the existence of a company, right? It's, it's amazing. So you obviously have super interesting stories you experience in your company every day, like the story of the CEO that fired his head of technology, which I find pretty stunning. What are things that, particular stories that motivate you, where you see, okay, your work makes a difference, has an impact on mentees and mentors?
Yes. So on the one side, obviously, it's when I take a look at the mentors, so the young people in our Digital8 talent pool, we have people there that came from, I don't know, there's this one mentor, she came from Indonesia, that she had this stunning career, but still the German bureaucracy was just before putting her back, right? This young woman, seeing this young woman giving advice to like top managers, is so, that's powerful, I would say. People who have a voice that wouldn't be listened to if it wasn't for our reverse mentoring programs. And on the other side, also seeing, for example, there's this executive from also a huge DAX corporate, and she's currently discussing with her mentor, who studied, I think, at Oxford machine learning, how could we as company be attractive for someone like you? Mm-hmm. And he would just say, well, why should I start in a German DAX company? I mean, the world's open. I could work for anybody in every company, right? But seeing those discussions, and then afterwards seeing a huge corporate talking about how can we change our culture? How can we give power to the younger generation? That is something where afterwards really say, well, that's worth working many hours the week. That's worth talking to so many different people, because when you see that you're actually having an impact, it's not only great for me and for us as the Digital8 team, but also for the young people who see I can do something, even if I'm only 18 years old, for example, I can have an impact. And I think it's also for the managers, it's also so nice because most of the times those relationships that are starting in this reverse mentoring, they last for more than just half a year where they're having their sessions. I know reverse mentoring tandem, they started 4 years ago and they are still meeting every quarter for lunch wherever they are, right? Which is, I mean, that's I love those stories.
Paul, thank you so much for your time. It was great, and it was amazing talking about, well, how generations are different, how they are the same, and how they can benefit from each other. I think it's very, very powerful message.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks a lot, and thanks a lot for listening in, guys. I'm sure we all learned a lot today around how to deal with challenges around generations being different or being the same. See you next time.